Hey everybody and welcome to Breaking Biotech. Thank you guys so much for watching today. My name is Matt, and if you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, or leave me a comment. It has been a while, and I am very glad to be back here talking to all you beautiful people about one of the most interesting topics I find. So I've been gone for about 4 weeks, I think, so the entire month of January, pretty much. And for those who are curious, I have found a new job. So I was a postdoc in a lab down here, and I recently switched to the commercial side of a company. And I won't tell the name, but it's been a very positive change, and I've enjoyed it despite being kind of away from being able to analyze stocks and things like that. So, it's been good, and hopefully I'll get back to it so I can do this more often. But the last time I was talking to everybody, we're in kind of a downspin. So I think it was early January, so probably around here. And at that time, I was talking about how Powell basically ruined the market with his overly hawkish attitude. And since then, we've had the cavalry come in and basically reverse everything that Powell said. And then on the 30th of this month, we saw that Powell came out and basically said that he was going to be now flexible on balance sheet normalization, and they would also halt rate increases until, we don't know. We don't know when they're going to go back to increasing or even if they're going to decrease. So throughout the month of January, though, multiple Fed members spoke, and they basically walked back this hawkish rhetoric that Powell had. And, they talk about being data dependent, but basically, in my perspective, it seems like the market was very worried in this downturn here that the Fed was going to be too hawkish and the economy was going to suffer for that reason. And then after they walked it all back, the market kind of gained a little bit more rationality and and recovered quite a bit. But, where we go from here, I'm not entirely sure. I'm surprised this move has been so unhampered without any real serious pullbacks. And the XBI has basically followed a similar trajectory as the S&P 500. So it's anyone's guess, but this support trend line seems to be intact so far. So you can use that as a bit of a guide. I don't see too much resistance until we get to maybe 2780 in the S&P 500. The XBI, closer to 85, but the real risky parts right now that I see in the market are the trade wars that are left, and then an overall global slowdown. So we're seeing a lot of companies come out and lower their guidance for the future, especially those that have exposure to Asia, and that's going to basically dictate how things go from here, I think. So one thing that I am going to put a position in is gold. And I know this is a biotech podcast, but just as a for those who are curious, I really feel like the Federal Reserve and all central banks can't really control their spending. And I think that gold is going to see quite a headwind based on this. So I need to put a position in gold, and I have no money in gold right now. And just, for those who are interested, I'm going to be doing that. But anyway, let's get back to it. So the last month has been huge. 10% increase in the S&P 500 and almost 20% increase in the XBI. The XBI is basically back to its December, the fall levels that it was at. So if you bought anywhere in here, you did pretty well. I bought and then sold, so I'll get into that at the end of the video. But one of the things that happened while I was gone is Bristol Myers bought Celgene. So great. $74 billion deal. BMY went down on the news, obviously, because they had to pay a bunch of money for Celgene. Overall, these deals are very complicated, but BMY is basically going to expand their oncology portfolio to a significant degree. These medicines, Revlimid, Pomalyst, they bring in a lot of revenue, and there is some uncertainty around the IP with these drugs. So it's not too certain how long BMY is going to be able to get this revenue at this level. Once the acquisition goes through, they are going to have control of Juno's CAR-T portfolio, and there was a Bluebird collaboration that they're gonna have. So, it does show that BMY is going to have a future ahead of them, and they're definitely going to have some revenue for the next few years. But long term, I'm not sure whether or not this is going to be a very positive or negative thing. So I'm personally going to look to break even on the shares and sell the ones I have, just because it's a little too uncertain for me. They do have some inflammation products which have done well, and they're looking for new indications on these and others. So those could also be positive in the future. And for those who are interested, I found this slide, and you can probably find it online, of the new combined company, the different products that they're going to have. So I recommend you to check that out. But for me, I'm going to sell. All right, the next thing I want to talk about that didn't get too much news, and this happened earlier in the month. So, I'm dating myself given that we're already February 1st. But Esperion had announced a deal with Daiichi Sankyo Europe, which is a company in Europe that's done very well commercializing a bunch of medicines in Europe. And this is good news because they're going to sell a lot of bempedoic acid, and that's what we want if we want the company to make money. And I think the company, or Esperion, actually went down in the news, which surprised me, given that this is, it brings us closer to bringing in revenue for the medicine. And there were some milestones that they received that, is good for Esperion. So I thought that was good news, and I noticed the upcoming events for Esperion. So for those who are interested, they're doing a sustained release version of bempedoic acid, and in the call, they talked about how this was important for NASH. And I wonder if they just brought up NASH just as because it's a hot thing to talk about right now. And I don't know how they figure, you could imagine that if you lower cholesterol in the blood, that could help with the inflammation associated with it in NASH. But it's a bit of a stretch, but I don't know, it's possible. And they also are looking at doing the combo pill for type 2 diabetes. And this might also have, it's all part of that whole disease, right? Having type 2 diabetes, having hypercholesterolemia, and heart disease. So this could be another indication, source of revenue kind of thing for them. So I would keep an eye out for that, even though, they're not going to be gigantic events here. But, these are the things to look out for, and I do think that the stock has a lot of potential. And yeah, I don't have it up, but we can talk about it at the end of the video. All right, so moving on, and I'm just blasting through these companies because a lot's gone on in the last month. So I didn't talk at all about JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, which was a pretty big deal. A lot went on there, and I'm just focusing on a few companies. But Sangamo presented some stuff, and not even going to talk about what they presented, because the real issue that people had is that they said they're not going to release any ERT withdrawal data at the World Symposium event on February 7th. So that's Thursday next week. And it's really, when I put this play on, I was hoping that Sangamo would be a lot quicker in resolving this confusion on whether or not their zinc finger therapy actually worked in humans. And this is the real crux. This is the problem, is that the data that they have, the patients were on ERT, and the ERT withdrawal data is going to show whether or not the zinc finger tech, whether all of it works in these patients. And I think that there's a huge upside if they can actually show that. Obviously, if they show that it doesn't work, or if they can't show it, the stock will crumble. But I think it's been hammered quite a bit lately on this uncertainty that's involved. So I only put a small position on back when it dropped months now, but I think by the end of the year they're going to show this data, and it'll confirm a lot. And I think one company at this conference actually talked about Sangamo being a potential buyout contender, and I think that also has held the stock up a little bit. But maybe I'm being naive when I think that they are going to be able to show that the therapy works, but we need to actually see the data. So, I'm entirely betting that they're going to show data that at least the zinc finger tech works or something in some sort of biopsy or in the ERT withdrawal. And, I'm going to exit after that. Okay, so AMRN. I only have 2 points here because not much going on, but earlier in the year they guided lower in terms of how many sales they were going to do, and I think it was the sales outside the USA that were particularly lacking. And I remember there was a bunch of hype around AMRN in they saw all this positive data, so now doctors were going to prescribe it off-label like today, but we didn't really see that too much, and so the stock dropped a bunch. I have it up here. So yeah, earlier in the year, stock dropped a whole bunch, and then it rose a bunch after Pfizer said that AMRN was a potential bio contender. So AMRN is there's a lot of hype surrounding the fish oil and what it's going to do. There aren't too many catalysts coming up though, so I think it's going to bounce around a lot just based on these headlines. But I do think that AMRN is a strong bio contender, and yeah, so that's why I'm holding quite a decent amount of shares. What percent of my portfolio? Okay, they're about 5%, so not crazy, but I do think that they have a lot of room to go if they are bought out, and until then, it's going to bounce around quite a bit. All right, another interesting thing that came out recently is crenezumab failed, and crenezumab was a phase 3 drug contender for Alzheimer's disease, and it was an antibody that would bind to the 1 to 40 and 1 to 42 beta amyloid protein. And if you want to go back to any of my previous videos when I talked about Alzheimer's disease, the amyloid hypothesis continues to get hammered, and this is the belief that the beta amyloid is the reason for the negative outcomes that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. So if you can get the beta amyloid and the plaques out of the brain, you can improve Alzheimer's outcomes. And so far, not looking that way. And this is interesting for us because Biogen has Biogen has a few candidates, but the ones that are most important is this aducanumab. There's a C in there. And aducanumab binds to both beta amyloid oligomers as well as the insoluble fibrils, and it's able to reduce this burden in the brain. And there's a lot of hype about this. Their BAN 2401 compound, and I forget exactly what it binds, but it only binds to, I think it's the oligomers, but it only binds to one of these. It had some controversial data that, I didn't really believe, and we're not really sure. Or they might have announced it, but I haven't been paying attention since it's sort of fallen out of the news. But it's basically not something the company's gonna hang their hat on as this is the cure for Alzheimer's. They did show that it would reduce the plaque burden in the brain, but it didn't really correlate perfectly to an improvement in symptomology. So aducanumab, because it can bind to both oligomers and insoluble fibrils, there's a lot of expectation that this is going to be the cure. But with the crenezumab failure, I'm not very hopeful that aducanumab is going to be able to find success. Am I going to short Biogen? I need to think about it because the stock is going to fall quite a bit, or it's going to rise quite a bit on that news, and I don't know if it's worth playing. But I thought this news was pretty interesting, and an unfortunate case, another unfortunate drug that's lost for Alzheimer's disease. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about, well, the second last company anyway, was Sarepta. So Sarepta also presented at JP Morgan Health Conference, and they were getting hammered lately in the stock market. I'll pull them up right here, and I was adding shares. So yes, since beginning of the year, well, actually, they followed the sector, and then they kind of got slowed down at the end of the month. And then these last few days, they've been beasting. So I thought I would talk about them because they're expecting limb-girdle data in Q1 of 2019. And seeing this data, and if it's positive, is going to send the stock right back up to where it was when the original results for the Duchenne muscular dystrophy data happened. So I see upside of around like 170 if that data is positive, just because of the hype. And I think I'll probably exit then, because I see the stock bouncing around until they can actually get their products into the market and start generating a lot of revenue. And they have a lot of research programs that are good, but I could see the stock continue to get hammered if the market starts to go down. Market starts to freak out about the macro issues that I talked about at the beginning. So but so short term, I see this limb girdle data as being very important. The vector that they use, so it's a gene therapy against the limb girdle version, this LMGD2E version of muscular dystrophy, and they use the same vector as the microdystrophin gene therapy that they presented earlier in June, and the difference is the protein. So instead of this microdystrophin gene, it's a beta sarcoglycan. So it's specific to this limb girdle version of muscular dystrophy. And what we saw in June was this robust expression, and this is a Western blot here showing robust expression of microdystrophin using this vector. So I have no reason to think that this would fail in these patients, and I think it's a 9-patient trial that's been staggered, and there's been no news so far that any patients have been discontinued or anything like that. So I'm feeling pretty optimistic about it, and I think that it'll be a good time to sell the stock and then wait on the sidelines a bit and go from there. So at JP Morgan, they talked about their exon skipping technology that's worked pretty well, and they have approval for eteplirsen, submitted the NDA for the exon 53, and they're continuing to do the work for exon 45. But really the most interesting technologies, in my opinion, are the gene therapy ones. And so they're doing the microdystrophin trials are continuing, and they're starting another trial for that, and the beta sarcoglycan gene, which is for the limb girdle. So that's going to be the most interesting, and we'll have to wait and see what that looks like, but I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so just to wrap things up, a lot going on in Q1 of 2019, and I'm very, very excited about the NASH results that we should expect. So Gilead and Intercept are going to present their phase 3 data on their NASH candidates. Selonsertib, which, if you've looked at the study, the phase 2, it was okay. They saw some effect. It wasn't the groundbreaking effect that people were really excited about with the other companies that they're in phase 2. Intercept had positive data in the liver, but they saw pretty negative side effects associated with the itching, the pruritus, as well as an increase of cholesterol in the blood, as well as exacerbation of type 2 diabetes. So I've been negative on Intercept, but frankly, I think these patients in this phase 3 are going to be, a lot of them are being treated with statins. So the issues of the cholesterol in the blood might not be there, and that's going to make it seem like the drug is a lot better than it really is by itself. But so in looking around on Twitter and stuff, and Jeffries thinks that there's less than 30% chance that the Gilead drug is going to be positive. If it is positive, the stock's going to increase quite a bit, I think, for Gilead, because this could really open up or continue to expand their liver portfolio of drugs. For Intercept, it could double the drug, or it could double the price of the stock, or it could halve the price of the stock. I really want to short Intercept, but they could see good data for the NASH resolution itself, even though they have all these bad side effects that could be mitigated with other compounds that are already treated, like statins or other things that can increase insulin sensitivity. So I'm not sure. I want to play with this, but any failures in these two drugs are going to lead to increases in the next, I guess, the lower phase NASH drugs that are out there. the Madrigals and the Vikings, I think they're going to increase quite a bit if either of these are a failure or their side effect profile isn't great. So even if Intercept does show positive data, but they show, a negative effect on blood cholesterol or on diabetes, I think you're not going to see a huge effect on Madrigal, or you might see an increase in those companies. Okay, so yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that. They said Q1 of 2019, so, could be tomorrow or it could be next month. So Sangamo is going to present some biochem data at the World Symposium next week, so look forward to that. And like I mentioned, the Sarepta limb girdle data. And I'm saying Sarepta even though it's a subsidiary of Sarepta. I forget the company name, but they're associated with each other. And yeah, I already talked about that. So to wrap things up a little bit, going to just talk about how the portfolio is done in the last few weeks. So I am pretty much even, which is disappointing given that the XBI is up almost 20%. If I had have sold everything at the end of 2018 and just bought the XBI, put all my money in there, I would be looking pretty good right now, but I have not done that. So, this is how it goes, but being even isn't the worst thing in the world. So, overall, the things that I wanted to bring up, so Illumina had a negative report earlier in the week, and I think a lot of this is going to be resolved if a trade deal gets done with China. Illumina has a lot of exposure to China, so I think there's a little bit of caution there. Fate continues to be range bound, so I think they went down to about 13 or so earlier in the week, and I'm going to make an effort to buy more if it does that again, because I see that they're very much being bound between this like 17 and 13 area. Other than that, yeah, so Sarepta has increased quite a bit, and I see them really continuing that, especially on good news to limb girdle. Yeah, Global Blood, I still think they're undervalued at 48, but we'll wait and see how that goes on with the FDA. They're meeting with the FDA, which they should be talking about. I did notice and wanted to bring up the volatility. So volatility has just been crushed the last little while, and this doesn't mean that it will continue to be crushed, but it does mean that we're sort of getting lullabied back into that slow creep that the market had in 2017. So don't expect very violent moves necessarily, but kind of prepare for them. So every now and then I'll throw like an XBI put that's very short term, and just as like a caution and a protection against my portfolio. But it looks here that we're kind of going back to this low vol environment. So I'm anticipating fewer dramatic moves that we saw in 2018, but going to still be cautious. Okay, so with that, gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. And if you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, leave me a comment. Give me an idea if you want me to look at any other companies. Actually, I think somebody sent me an email, and I only thought of that now because I was reminded to ask for ideas. But I will look at that, and I'll look at anything else. But otherwise, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.